Hey everybody, I'm Christopher Greene. You're watching AMTV, Alternative Media Television. I'm with acclaimed investor Jim Rogers.
And trade wars frequently or often have led to rail wars. Everyone out there is smarter than the government, no question about that. But the government has the guns. I'm wildly bullish on blockchain. It's going to change everything we know, The debt everywhere in the world has skyrocketed, slapping somebody in the face.
They're going to fight back.
They have to.
How bad do things get? Are we talking another world war? Like, how bad does this get?
I'm a former Merrill Lynch broker who went rogue with a video camera after the largest financial crash in world history in 2008 and 09. I set out to expose the truth. 11 years ago, I started Alternative Media Television from my basement and started making videos when people laughed, when people said social media wouldn't amount to anything. Now it's a multi-trillion-dollar industry, and it's changed my life, and interviewed celebrities like Steve Forbes, Eric Schmidt, Ron Paul, and many others. This is Alternative Media Television, and we are AMTV.
I'm with acclaimed investor Jim Rogers, world traveler, and you're so humble. I wanted to let you know, I'm excited to meet you, by the way. When I was a teenager, I read your book, Hot Commodities. And this was years ago when it came out. It really changed my perspective as a young investor, and it piqued my interest in physical gold, silver, precious metals. Since that, I started making videos from a bedroom 11 years ago when people laughed at social media. And we've since grown our platform. And I've put out, I think, about 3,000 videos over the years. And now we're starting to travel the world. It's my first time to Singapore, and I gotta tell you, I'm so impressed. This place is amazing, and it makes me think that the United States is behind the curve, especially when we're speaking about Asia. Now, I wanna get into financial markets today, and we're on a little bit of a time lag. The Dow Jones Industrial Average is up about 600 points. Okay, we have been operating on funny money.
Just so you know, the Dow is closed right now. It's 10 o'clock at night in New York.
There's a huge time lag, right? So
Yes.
Okay, so the last close, I think we had this rally on the words of Jerome Powell, that he's going to be, quote unquote, neutral on interest rates. For the last decade or so, post the 2008-09 mess, we've pretty much been operating on 0% interest rates, all of this stimulus, quantitative easing, Operation Twist, the list goes on and on. And then now we're trading at these all-time highs. What is your perspective currently where we sit today? How much more long in the tooth could these markets go?
Well, it's only the U.S. which is making all-time highs. There are many, many other markets in the world which are down, and some down a whole lot. So if your perspective is just the U.S., you're right. But it was interesting what you said about Asia. You go to Hong Kong, you go to Beijing, you'll say, oh my God, New York is a third world airport and third world taxis and third world roads. You come to some of these countries and you will be stunned, as I can see you have been by Singapore. My view of the U.S. market is that the U.S. market is near an all-time high, as you know. Maybe there's one more shot. If Trump and the Chinese say something nice to each other soon, that will cause people to go up even more. But that's probably the last shot. Now, that could be a big move, but I don't see much after that.
What is, looking at commodities, oil, you know, it used to be people were telling me, I used to work as a retail broker for Merrill Lynch during the height of the crisis. I call that my MBA. That was my experience. Yeah, it was better than going to some of these institutions, maybe. I learned a lot, but looking at oil, you know, they used to tell us there's peak oil. There's not enough of it. There's not enough of it. We're running out. Now there seems to be a surplus, too much. Are oil prices today an indication of global deflation ahead? What are your thoughts?
Well, it's peak oil. We certainly know we're at peak reserves of oil. That peaked some time ago, except for fracking. Now, fracking came along, turned into a bubble. That bubble has popped now. But yes, that caused a glut of oil for a while. In my view, oil is in the process of making a complicated bottom. We'll look back in a few years and say, well, you know, 2015, 16, 17, 18, 19, oil made its bottom. And then it will go higher because reserves are declining everywhere in the world, except fracking. But that bubble, the fracking bubble, broke. It used to be that if you could spell fracking, he'd write you a check for $10 million on the spot. I was so excited. But we now know you have to make money at fracking, and it's not so easy. So we're in the process of making a bottom in oil, and down the road it'll go much higher.
Okay, so new technology, we've seen some advancements. You've also said many times that the next bear market will be the worst of your lifetime. What does that mean? How bad do things get? Are we talking another Great Depression? Are we talking another World War? We've got allegedly a trade war with China right now. Like, how bad does this get, in your opinion?
Well, I'm older than you, I'm pretty sure. And in 2008, we had a problem because of too much debt. Christopher, since then, the debt, oh my gosh, the debt everywhere in the world has skyrocketed. The Federal Reserve, the central bank in the U.S., has increased its balance sheet by 500% in 10 years. I mean, that alone is an unbelievable statement 20 years ago. People could not have conceived in their wildest imaginations that any central bank, major central bank, could increase its balance sheet by 500% in 10 years.
Yeah, that's insane.
The world did not work that way. It could not happen, but it has. So the debt everywhere has gone through the roof. So the next time around, it's going to be the worst in my lifetime. Doesn't seem a strange statement to me. You saw what happened in 2008 when debt was much lower. Now, the central bank in the U.S., or at least Janet Yellen, who was the previous head, says there are not going to be any more financial problems. We're not going to have economic...
I don't know if I believe that, but it's pretty funny.
Has said they're not going to have any more economic problems. Now, if you believe Mrs. Yellen, Dr. Yellen, got a PhD from an Ivy League university, if you believe Mrs. Yellen, you should not listen to me at all.
Well, I think I'd rather listen to you, to be honest. So you love to invest in hated markets, right? What's hated? My parents taught me this. My dad learned investing as a young age. He said, buy low, Christopher, sell high. Buy things that are hated. Buy things that are out of favor. I know you espouse this as well. Bitcoin is hated. Blockchain is hated by a lot of the establishment. What is your view of this new technology? Are you looking at it as an investment opportunity? Is it on your radar?
Well, Bitcoin and blockchain are two different things. I'm wildly bullish on blockchain. It's going to change everything we know. Everything we know. It put a lot of people out of business. But electricity put a lot of people out of business. We're not going to close down electricity because it changed the world. But cryptos are going to disappear. They're going to go to zero.
So you think mostly all cryptos? Or?
Many already have. Well, there may be government cryptos. The government is going to wind up in charge. The cryptocurrency guys say all the time, we're smarter than the government, and they are. Everyone out there is smarter than the government, no question about that. But the government has the guns. And Christopher, when the guns come around and say you're not going to use that, in the 1930s, people could use anything they wanted as money. Gold, coins, paper money, sugar, seashells, anything you want. And the Bank of England, which is the most important financial or most important economy in the world, said from now on, using anything except Bank of England banknotes is an act of treason. Well, treason means they execute you. So
that's pretty serious. That is something to consider.
So people stopped using seashells, sugar cubes, and anything except Bank of England authorized money. That will happen again if the cryptos get much traction.
Okay.
I don't expect them to get much traction, but if they do, the governments will step in with their own cryptos or treason.
Now, you might be right. I mean, that's very interesting perspective. What do you make of futures trading? For example, CBOE, CME now trades Bitcoin futures contracts. We have seen a lot of this now move to Wall Street. I've been speaking with hedge fund managers that tell me, well, they think the crypto market's going to be a $40 trillion market in the not too distant future. What do you make of that? It looks like Wall Street's buying this stuff. So are they just buying it and it's going to go to zero, or?
It's going to go to 40 trillion. In my view, it's going to go to zero. We don't have to debate it. I don't have to debate with it. The market will tell us. In a year or two or five, we'll know whether it's zero or 40 trillion. I'm not short, but I'm certainly not long either. If it goes to 40 trillion, I will look back and say, oh my, another mistake.
We all make them. And so I've made a lot of mistakes in my young years too. So
I continually make mistakes. My young years, old years, all years.
So let's talk about the trade war. Donald Trump, right, he's this force in America. Many did not expect him to win the U.S. election. He's considered an outsider. Now he's president of the United States. He's bold in a lot of matters. He's protectionist, some would argue. There's this trade war with China. I've heard you say that this is not necessarily making America great again, it's making China and Asia great again. So is this the 21st century of China?
In my view, the 21st century is the century of Asia. That's why I'm here. That's why I moved here 11 years ago. Yes, he's, in 2000, on his first day, he got out of the TPP. Everybody in Asia looked around and said, oh my God, that means China. China owns Asia now because America pulled out and left Asia. The Koreans aren't going to take over. The Japanese aren't. The Australians aren't. So all of a sudden, everybody realized, oh my gosh, that means Asia is now Chinese, and there's no competition in Asia. There's competition, obviously, and things aren't that simple. But basically, Mr. Trump pulled out of Asia and left it to the Chinese, and every time you turn around, put huge sanctions on the Russians. So the Russians and the Chinese, you go to Moscow airport now, it's full of Chinese. You have long queues because 5 years ago there were no Chinese in Moscow. Now they're everywhere. So the Russians and the Chinese are getting closer and closer together. The Chinese and the Persians. Mr. Trump is helping Asia and the Chinese and other countries in a lot of ways, whether he knows it or not. And apparently he doesn't know it. And if he knows it, he doesn't care.
Do you believe that Russia hacked the U.S. election? There seems to be a lot of propaganda. I really don't listen to the talking heads, to be frank with you. The mainstream media.
No idea. I didn't change my vote because of anybody hacking me. I assure you, I voted my way, and if somebody hacked me, they didn't have any influence.
Okay. Where do you think?
By the way, America for decades has been hacking everybody's elections. We didn't have the internet and those.
Absolutely, we see wars overseas in the Middle East. That's more than hacking.
We're always interfering in somebody's election or pulling off a military coup or something. So it seems a little bit hypocritical for Washington to say, they're trying to influence our elections when we have not just been trying. We have been very successful in interfering in elections for decades.
Now, prior to the outbreak of World War II, the United States placed an oil embargo on Japan, effect somewhat of a trade war, and then we got the bombing of Pearl Harbor. Could something as severe, and I pray it doesn't, but could something as severe as that happen again as a result of the policies we see out of Washington, D.C. today?
It wasn't just oil back then. They also put an embargo on scrap steel, and the Japanese needed scrap iron, et cetera, for their economy. So they took it as an act of war, rightly. I mean, if somebody stopped exporting to the U.S., I promise you, we would take it as an act of war if nobody would sell us oil or steel or whatever we need. So yes, that is what happened. What is happening now, historically, I'm sure you know better than I do. Historically, trade wars have always been a disaster. Nobody's ever won a trade war. History is very clear about the effects of trade wars. Now, I don't know if Mr. Trump knows history or cares. He thinks he's smarter than history. Maybe he is. I don't know. But nobody's ever been smarter than trade wars. And trade wars frequently or often have led to real wars. I mean, it makes sense. You start slapping somebody in the face, and you slap them again, or you slap them again.
They're going to fight back.
Actually, they have to. Whether they should or not is a different argument. And I sometimes wonder, wouldn't the Chinese be better just doing nothing? Because it would raise the cost of living in the U.S. a lot, while they would not have an increase of cost of living.
Yeah, and if we were more friendly with the Chinese, couldn't we almost take over the world along with them, and we could make a lot of money, right?
American and Chinese work together with American China. Oh my gosh, can you imagine? Can you imagine what a powerhouse that would be? That's the idea, but most ideal situations and scenarios usually don't work.
Yeah, could be wishful thinking, right? And there's usually a lot of disruption out there. Where are the opportunities for our younger viewers tuning in, maybe some of our older viewers? What should they be studying? What should they consider investing in? Where should they be in the world? Is it too late to get to Asia now? This is my first time to Singapore. Should I move out here? Should I bring my family? Should I set up shop here?
I have to leave that to you. I moved to Asia when I was 65, as a matter of fact. I had my second daughter in Asia when I was 65. But everybody has to make that decision. Moving is a huge decision. Even moving from New York to St. Louis is a huge decision, so much less moving from a country to a far, far, far away a country and culture. So everybody has to make that decision. Your forebears made that decision. Your forebears packed up, left, went to a hostile country where they knew nobody and knew no language, knew no customs or anything else, but clearly it didn't hurt you. In fact, some
Someone in my family tree that took an axe to the face in a covered wagon. They were attacked by Native Americans. I saw a picture of this when my grandma was alive. He had a huge scar and he survived. And they defended themselves. I mean, think about the risks people used to take. I think we've got it easy nowadays.
Oh my gosh, can you imagine? You packed up, you got on a boat, you didn't know where you were going, you didn't know if you would survive. You got there, there was no credit cards, there was no internet. You got there, you didn't know where you were going, few maps. And even if there was a map, it said, okay, if you go west from here, who knows what you're going to see or find. And your forebear was exactly one of those people. He didn't have a Holiday Inn to go to. He didn't have anything. He was just out there. There were millions that did that. And the U.S. at the time gave people land if they would come to the U.S. We said, here's a grant. You come to the U.S., you work, you can get rich if you want to. So we begged immigrants to Singapore. Singapore was a swamp with 500,000 people 40 years ago. You see what it is now.
It's the most amazing sight I've ever seen. Honestly, I'm surprised how dense it is, how clean it is, how respectful people are.
Well, they begged foreigners to come, but they limited it to successful, educated, smart people. They didn't just take in anybody. In the U.S., we took in anybody, which was actually good for the U.S., because I'm sure I couldn't get a visa to the U.S. 100 years ago or 150 years ago. But my forebears came. Some of them went 400 years ago, some of them went 150 years ago. I'm sure I couldn't get a visa if I wanted to go to the U.S. now.
Do you have citizenship here? Can you acquire Singaporean citizenship?
I do not. I'm an American citizen. In Singapore, you can only have one passport, which that's to me is dangerous in the next 20 or 30 years to only have one passport, no matter what the passport is, because the world is going to have tumult, as we were discussing. Back to what we were discussing. Trade wars have often led to shooting wars. You see what's happening. America's not making friends anywhere that I can see. We're making friends anywhere, and that has usually been dangerous. And Mr. Trump went to military school. He already thinks he's smarter than the rest of us because he went to an Ivy League college. He also went to military school, so he thinks he's smarter than the generals.
So because of these geopolitical risks, are you buying gold? Are you buying other commodities at these levels today?
I am not buying gold. I have not bought serious gold since 2010. I own it. Oh no, I own a lot of gold. That happens to be, that's China. That's the Bank of China. This is the Bank of the Federal Reserve. This is U.S. gold. So no, I own gold, but I haven't bought any serious gold. I buy gold to give as gifts like this, but no.
So what levels would you start considering buying gold?
If and when gold goes under 1,000 U.S. dollars per ounce, and I hope I'm smart enough to buy a lot of gold. Because before this is over, Christopher, gold is going to go through the roof. But in times of turmoil, people have always, when they distrust the government or distrust the money, they go to gold and silver.
So could it become a bubble? How high do you think it could go?
Into a bubble. I don't want it to turn into a bubble because I'll have to sell.
Could we see something crazy like 10,000 an ounce?
Crazy. You pick the number, okay? Whatever it is. I'm not smart enough. What you can do is you can watch AMTV.
Awesome. I've heard you say that the next multimillionaires will be farmers. They will be the ones driving the Lamborghinis, etc. Do you still recommend that? Should I become a farmer? Should children in America learn how to farm, drive tractors, these kinds of?
If you move to Singapore, I wouldn't urge you to become a farmer. There's not much farmland in Singapore. There's a lot in Asia, lots of places in Asia that have great opportunities for agriculture. Agriculture has been a disaster for 30, 35 years. And as you know, we've had great cycles in world history, times when the financial types are on top of the world, times when the people who produce real goods are on top of the world. Read history, read novels, and you will see that what happens has always happened in the world. Agriculture has been so bad that the average age of farmers in America is 58. I mean, I can go on and on with statistics which to me are startling, and which to me show that the time is coming again when one should think about agriculture.
Have you made any?
By the way, especially in China right now and in Russia right now, in China, Beijing has realized that in the past 30 years, the people in the cities have done staggeringly well. Go if you don't understand. And they have said, oh my gosh, the countryside has not participated. So now they'll do anything you want in the countryside to help you, whether you have a restaurant or a farm, tractors, whatever. And in Russia, we put these serious sanctions on Russia to hurt the Russians. You cannot believe how Russian agriculture is booming. It's unbelievable.
So are you still investing in Russia right now?
I have in Russia. I'm a director of a couple of a Russian fertilizer company, a Russian agriculture country. You know, all the Russian farmers are saying, "Thank you, Mr. Trump. Thank you, Mr. Trump. You
The best thing that could have happened to them.
He's saving China. He's saving Russia. He's saving a lot of places."
Very good. Are you making any other investments? Any other advice in closing to our audience?
Well, I'm always looking for things to invest. I'm always looking at China, some places, Korea, Japan. I mean, these places, some of these markets are down a lot. Zimbabwe is a disaster. I am looking to invest there. Ghana, there are places where huge changes are taking place. Colombia, Venezuela. I haven't invested in Venezuela yet, partly because of sanctions, but I am. If you can show me things that are not sanctioned, I would probably buy them today in Venezuela, because they're beginning to realize, oh my gosh, we have ruined this country for the last 20-odd years. So there are changes taking place, and whenever you can find a disaster, as your father taught you, think about investing.
The time to buy, and the consensus is always wrong, right? The herd is usually wrong. Go against the herd, go against the grain.
Well, you don't go against it just because the herd is going in one way, but you certainly stop and say, wait a minute, if they're all going that way, why don't I look and see what's happening over here? Because maybe there are opportunities over here.
Jim, thank you so much. That was a great pleasure. I really appreciate it. Thank you, guys. Thank you for tuning in. This is AMTV, hard hitting and in your face.